Mia Carter had only been working at the Marble Crown Hotel for 2 days. The uniform didn't quite fit, her hands smelled of cleaning chemicals, and the head maid already looked at her with thinly veiled irritation. New hires never lasted long here. By evening, only a few rooms remained on the 23rd floor. The corridor was empty, the light flickered slightly, and the low hum of the air conditioning made every sound feel too loud. Mia checked her list: 2,307, done; 2,308, linens; 2,309, vacant. She swiped the card. The lock clicked. Inside, it was dim, only a strip of light from the window cut across the floor. On the table, a glass, an ashtray, and a gun. Real. Heavy. Metallic. Mia froze. A man sat by the window, half his face in shadow. A thin, faded scar traced his cheek. He was looking directly at her, no surprise, no curiosity. Just calm, unreadable focus. "Sorry," Mia managed, her voice barely audible. I must have opened the wrong room." He didn't answer. Only moved his hand slightly, resting it near the gun. Mia stepped back. Then again. And quietly closed the door. The keycard stayed in the lock. Downstairs, she said nothing. Just sat in the staff lounge, staring at the floor until her heartbeat slowed. An hour later, security went up to the 23rd floor. After that, someone said it was sealed off until morning. Something had happened. Mia didn't ask what. The next day, the call came without warning. The hotel manager said simply, "You're wanted for questioning. Security office." Mia thought it was a routine check. After all, there had been some incident on the 23rd floor last night. But when the door closed behind her, everything changed. In the chair by the window sat the same man. No uniform. No badge. Just a gray suit, a calm face, and that familiar scar. "Mia Carter?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Sit down." His voice was steady, not loud, but the kind that didn't need to be. A folder lay open on the desk, her job application inside. He flipped a page without looking. "You opened a door yesterday," he said. "You saw me." "I thought the room was vacant," she stammered. "Did you see anyone else?" Mia shook her head. He studied her for a few seconds that felt like minutes. "Good," he said finally. "Then listen carefully." He leaned forward slightly. The faint scent of tobacco and metal reached her, the same smell from last night. "My name is Alexei Markov," he said. "From this moment, you don't go home. You don't call anyone. You don't tell anyone where you work." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because you stepped into something you shouldn't have. And now, they've noticed you." He unlocked his phone and turned the screen toward her, a grainy security frame, the corridor, her face, the door to 2309 behind her. "Cameras see more than you think." "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing. Except silence." He paused, then added, "I can protect you. Or I can let them reach you first. Your choice." Mia said nothing. Fear filled the room, thick and tangible. Alexei wrote an address on a slip of paper. "Tonight, a car will pick you up. You'll go with them. It's safe there. And if I don't? Then tomorrow, your name disappears from the employee list." He stood, calm and precise, as if following a script only he knew. "I'm not threatening you, Mia," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm just telling you what happens when people ignore reality. When she left the office, her hands shook so hard she could barely put her gloves on. In the hallway, every camera seemed aimed at her. Later that night, she tried to convince herself she wouldn't go. That it was all nonsense. But near midnight, headlights appeared outside her building. A black car, no plates. The window rolled down, and that same voice said, "Time's up, Mia." She stood barefoot in the dark, bag in hand. And realized there really was no choice. The car moved in silence. Outside, Brooklyn lights blurred through the rain, pale reflections sliding down the window glass. Mia sat in the back seat, gripping the strap of her bag. The driver never spoke, and the man beside him didn't look like hotel security. Their calmness was the most frightening thing of all. They stopped in front of a small brick house with shuttered windows. No sign. No neighbors nearby. "This is where you'll stay," the driver said as she stepped out. Inside, it was clean, too clean. The faint smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee and metal. The apartment was simple, almost sterile: white walls, a single couch, a table facing a narrow window. On the table, a phone, an old laptop, and a sealed envelope. Mia opened it. Keys. A card. And one sentence written in precise, even handwriting. "Do not leave without permission." She exhaled. Not a prison. But not freedom either. 3 days passed. Meals arrived on schedule, the same headlines played on TV: "Incident at Manhattan Hotel still under investigation." The phone stayed silent. Sometimes, in the quiet, Mia felt someone was there, watching, listening. That night she noticed the air vent above the door. Too new, too polished. She stood on a chair and leaned closer. Behind the slats, a faint red light blinked once. A camera. She didn't scream. She simply sat down on the floor and stared at that tiny point of light. He's watching. On the 4th day, someone knocked. She opened the door. Alexei. Same calm expression. Same unreadable eyes. "I told you this was temporary," he said. "But last night, someone tried to get inside." Mia felt her pulse spike. "Who?" "The kind of people you don't need to know." He walked in, checking the corners, the window locks. "You're lucky I was nearby." She sat on the edge of the couch. "So you've been watching me?" "I've been keeping you safe," he said simply. "That's not the same thing." There was no anger in his tone, only quiet certainty. "I need to understand," she said. "Why me?" "I'm just a maid." He studied her for a long moment, as if the answer was written somewhere in her face. "Because you walked into a room where coincidences don't exist." He stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the wall beside her. "Don't fear the camera," he said quietly. "It isn't against you. It stands in for me." She couldn't find words. Everything about him was a contradiction: danger wrapped in composure, authority laced with something almost protective. When he turned to leave, she asked, "What if I decide to go?" He stopped at the door. "Then you'll have to live with what you know. And that's harder than it sounds." After he left, silence returned. But it felt different now, heavier, alive. Somewhere beyond the walls, Mia knew he was still there. Watching. Waiting. Mia stopped counting the days. The light outside her window changed like scenes in a slow film: morning, evening, another sleepless night. Her life had shrunk to a few quiet rooms, muted footsteps behind the wall, and Alexei's voice that appeared less often now, always without warning. He never talked about the past or about who exactly was after her. Only short, precise sentences that sounded like orders. Don't open the door for anyone. If you hear footsteps in the hallway, turn off the light. Trust me, even if you don't understand why. Sometimes he would sit across from her on the gray sofa, and they wouldn't speak at all. But something in that silence began to change. He didn't look at her like a witness or a burden anymore. It was as if he was trying to understand her, to solve a puzzle he hadn't meant to find. One night, Mia woke to a faint noise behind the wall. Her hand went instinctively for the phone, but the screen lit up with a message. Don't be afraid. It's ours. Moments later, Alexei walked in. No coat, hair damp from the rain, face tense and tired. It's fine, he said. Just a check. She noticed a thin line of blood on his wrist. You're hurt, she said quietly. It's nothing. He sat by the window, shadows cutting across his face. For the first time, he looked almost human. You know, he said, voice low, it's strange that I trust you. I don't usually do that. Mia handed him a damp cloth, their fingers brushed. I don't either, she said. The next morning, everything shifted. Her phone vibrated, an unknown number, one message. He isn't who he says he is. Check his closet. Her pulse raced. Slowly, she opened the door to the room Alexei had told her never to enter. Inside, a dark suit, a holster, and a folder filled with photographs. One of them showed her in the hotel uniform. Underneath, a handwritten note, do not touch. Use. She stepped back, the walls seeming to close in. Use. Was that what she was to him? The door opened. Alexei stood there, calm but tense. You looked where you shouldn't have, he said. Is it true? Mia's voice shook. You've been watching me for some other reason? If I meant to harm you, he said quietly, we wouldn't be having this conversation. He moved closer, his presence filling the room, his gaze unreadable. They already know you're here, he said. The only way to stop it now is to make them believe you're with me. What does that mean, with you? He gave a tired, almost ironic smile. Tonight, you'll go where I tell you. Say what I tell you. That's all. This is a trap? For them. Not for you. That evening, they drove through the city in silence. Mia sat beside him, watching the reflections of neon glide over his face. What am I supposed to say? She asked. The truth, he replied. That you walked into the wrong room. That everything else is on me. He looked at her for a long second in the rearview mirror. If something feels wrong, stay close. The building they entered was an old warehouse, quiet, cold, the air heavy with dust and tension. Men waited inside. Not thugs, professionals, their eyes sharp and distrustful. Alexei spoke briefly, his tone calm but firm. Mia stood near him, aware of every glance, every whispered question about who she was. Then, everything blurred. A sudden noise, a flash of movement, lights shifting. Alexei caught her arm and pulled her toward the wall. Stay behind me, he said. Moments later, silence. He turned to her, not angry, but serious, eyes searching hers. Now they'll believe it. Believe what? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. That you're with me. That using you isn't an option anymore. He let go of her arm. It's over. No, Mia said quietly, meeting his gaze. It's just beginning. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe even admiration. He gave a faint smile, the first one without distance or command. Then hold on, Mia. From now on, we play this game together. The house stood by the ocean, gray, weathered, and silent, as if it had forgotten that people could live inside it. Waves broke against the rocks with a dull, steady sound, and salt mist clung to the windows like frost. Mia didn't ask where they were. Alexei only said, "They won't find us here." The house was almost empty. A large living room, worn furniture, the scent of sea and metal. On the table, a first aid kit, clean bandages, and a few maps spread out beside a half-empty cup of coffee. Alexei took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeve. A shallow cut ran across his shoulder, dried but still raw. "Let me," Mia said. He started to refuse, but she had already taken a cotton pad and disinfectant. "This isn't part of your job," he murmured. "Then call it an exception." He said nothing. Just watched her hands, careful, steady, tracing the wound like it might tell her something about him. For a moment, they were closer than either intended. When she finished, she asked quietly, "How long will we have to stay here?" "As long as it takes for things to settle," he replied. Days passed. The ocean breathed outside the windows, constant, patient, almost hypnotic. Alexei rarely left now. He spent hours marking points on maps, answering encrypted calls, writing things down in a notebook she never saw. Sometimes he taught her how to use the radio, how to cover tracks, how to tell direction by the wind and the tide. "You're turning me into you," she said once. "No," he replied. "I'm making sure you can survive if I'm not here." They shared quiet dinners, short conversations about nothing, food, weather, the sound of the sea. But in those fragments of normal life, something unspoken grew. He never smiled fully, but sometimes his eyes softened, as if remembering how. One night, a storm rolled in from the ocean. The wind hammered the walls, rain slashed at the glass, and the air smelled of salt and electricity. Mia lay awake, listening to Alexei's footsteps moving from room to room, checking the locks, the shutters, the doors. "You can't stay alert forever," she said when he passed by. "I can," he answered simply. "And I have to." She stood near him, the lamplight cutting sharp angles across his face. "Don't you ever rest?" "Only when I know no one can touch what I'm protecting." "And who protects you?" He looked at her then, not with suspicion or distance, but with something quiet and fragile, like he wasn't used to being seen that way. "No one," he said after a pause. "Not until now." The storm raged, waves pounding so hard the walls seemed to tremble. They sat together in the dark when the power went out, the sound of the sea filling the silence between them. For the first time, Mia allowed herself a dangerous thought, that she didn't want to leave. Not out of fear, but because, next to him, she finally felt safe. A strange kind of safety, sharp and warm and terrifying all at once. Alexei said nothing, but his hand brushed against hers, just a fleeting touch, more warning than comfort, yet it lingered. Outside, the ocean roared, wild and endless. Inside, silence stretched between them, fragile, electric, alive. The night felt endless. And for the first time since it all began, Mia didn't wait for dawn. The storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy, like a decision waiting to be made. The house stood silent, listening. Mia woke before dawn and realized Alexei was gone. On the table, a cup of cold coffee and a short note. "Don't leave. I'll be back by evening." But evening came, and he didn't. Time stretched unbearably. At first she just waited. Then she began walking from room to room, every corner carried traces of him. His jacket hung over the chair. A map lay open on the windowsill, Sand still clung to the floor, faint footprints leading nowhere. Everything whispered the same thing: he was here. And now he's not. When night fell, she heard a sound outside, short, sharp, not like the wind. She went to the window. Down on the road, headlights flickered once, then disappeared. A second later came the smell of smoke, salt and something burnt. She didn't know what to do. The phones were locked, no signal, no way to reach him. By midnight, the horizon glowed orange. At first she thought it was lightning. Then she realized it wasn't. Something was burning. The next morning, the news broke. Explosion on the New Jersey coast. A private property destroyed. One person missing, presumed dead. The photo flashed on screen, blackened walls, smoke curling into the pale sky, and a roofline she knew too well. The same house. She didn't cry. She just sat on the floor, watching the screen until the image blurred. No tears. No sound. Just an emptiness so wide it swallowed everything. He left without goodbye. And silence was all that remained. Days passed. She left the coast, taking only her passport and his jacket. In Brooklyn, she found a small room above a laundromat and a job at a corner cafe. She tried to forget, to live as if none of it had ever happened. But sometimes, in a passing stranger, she caught a familiar silhouette. In the hum of traffic, she could almost hear his voice. Trust me. Even if you don't understand why. At night, she often woke with the feeling someone was standing by the door. But when she opened her eyes, there was only the shadow of a streetlight on the wall. The papers called it the death of a Russian businessman allegedly linked to organized networks. No name. But she knew. Everyone did. She stopped watching the news after that. Life became a blur: coffee, shifts, the sound of rain on her window. She moved through it like someone underwater, slow, detached, waiting for nothing. Until one morning, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No sender. No handwriting she recognized. Inside, a small silver pendant with a single engraved letter, I. And a folded note. Live safe. I'm close. Her hands trembled. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Then tears finally came, soft, quiet, unstoppable. He was alive. Not here. Not reachable. But alive. That night she walked down to the ocean. The wind was cold, waves breaking in steady rhythm, just like the nights in their hideout. She held the pendant in her fist and looked out across the dark water. The city hummed behind her, but she only heard the sea. You're still here, aren't you? She whispered. No answer came. Only a wave rolled up the sand to her feet, exactly where the old house had once stood. Spring came quietly. Snow melted, and the city softened, breathing again after a long silence. Mia no longer waited for letters. She had learned to live simply: morning coffee, quiet shifts at work, long walks by the river when the streetlights flickered on. Sometimes she caught her reflection in dark windows and didn't quite recognize the woman looking back. Not a maid. Not a witness. Just someone who had survived. The pendant still hung around her neck, the silver letter A. Sometimes, when she couldn't sleep, she'd press it to her lips and whisper into the dark. Where are you? Almost a year had passed when it happened. One morning, a plain envelope waited on her doorstep. No name. No return address. Inside, a ticket, Newark, Montreal. And a single line, written in the same deliberate handwriting she could never forget. If you choose to come, follow the ocean. North Shore. Her heart struck once, hard, certain, and then everything was already decided. The train moved through a landscape of white and quiet. Snow blurred the fields, and the horizon dissolved into pale light. Mia sat by the window, her reflection merging with the frost outside. Every mile felt like she was shedding an old version of herself. When the train stopped, no one was waiting. Only the wind, sharp and salt-sweet, carrying the faint murmur of waves. She walked toward the sound until she saw it, a gray house by the cliffs, windows glowing with golden light. Her hand trembled when she knocked. The door opened. Alexei stood there, no suit, no mask, no armor. Just a man, older, gentler, with the same scar and eyes that still held too much silence. They didn't speak at first. Then he said quietly, "I knew you'd come." She couldn't answer, words seemed useless. She just stepped inside. The air smelled of coffee and sea salt. He poured her tea, his hands not quite steady. "I couldn't stay," he said. "Back then it wasn't safe. For either of us." "I know," she said. "But I waited anyway." He smiled faintly, like someone testing the word hope. "I promised I'd be near. I just never said when." Later they walked down to the shore. The northern ocean was cold and restless, but the sunset turned the waves to gold. Alexei reached into his pocket and drew out a pendant, identical to hers, engraved with M. "Found it," he said. "Thought it should finally belong where it was meant to." He slipped it on, and for a moment the world felt whole again. Mia looked at him, all the questions she'd carried for months dissolving into the sound of the sea. "What now?" "Now we stop running," he said softly. She smiled, tears bright in the fading light. "And no one knows where we are?" "No one," he answered. "And that's exactly how I want it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. The sea roared, the wind tore through the cliffs, and for the first time, there was peace. That night, the house on the northern shore became their beginning. A few months later, they crossed the ocean again, not as fugitives, but as two names on new passports. A year later, warmth had replaced snow. They lived in Lisbon, on a quiet street above the harbor. Their passports read Elena and Mark Costa. No questions asked, no reason for anyone to look twice. Mia worked in a small art studio, painting seascapes, gray, infinite, full of motion. Collectors said they felt like memories. Alexei ran a modest import business, legal, discreet, steady. Sometimes he came home late, smelling faintly of the docks. They had no photographs, no social media, no traces, only a simple rhythm: coffee in the morning, church bells at noon, the smell of bread from the bakery across the street. At night they sat on the balcony, watching ships disappear into the fog. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked once, meaning the chaos, the danger. He shook his head. "I miss nothing," he said. "Everything I wanted is here." Sometimes, though, a letter arrived, no stamp, no return address, a single line written in the same hand. "The world believes we disappeared. Let's keep it that way." Mia would smile, fold the paper neatly, and tuck it beside their passports, a reminder of the ghosts they once were. One evening they walked down to the docks. The air smelled of rain and oranges, and the tide came in slow and even. She leaned on the railing, eyes closed, listening to the ocean's deep, familiar voice. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her shoulders, and murmured, "Do you remember that sound? The night we thought it was the end." "I remember," she said. "And what came after?" He kissed her hair, unhurried, sure. They stood there for a long time, the lights of the city trembling on the dark water. The ocean had seen it all, their fear, their silence, their return. Now it was only calm. And for the first time, peace didn't feel like hiding. It felt like home.